PEI, a beautiful island of red dirt roads, lighthouses, potatoes, red sandstone cliffs, windmills, potatoes, the incredible Confederation Rail Trail, sandy beaches, and potatoes. This is Cycling Canada, PEI. After crossing the Confederation Bridge via shuttle, I set off straight away on the Trans-Canada Highway, heading directly for the city of Charlottetown. After a night of rest and morning of errands, I began a clockwise loop of the island, following the Island Walk route. This route follows scenic coastal roads, red dirt tracks, and parts of the Confederation Trail on its 700-kilometer journey around the island. And yes, it is entirely accessible by bicycle. Leaving the city, I headed southwest towards the coast. It was already late afternoon, so the sun set quickly, and I had to find a wild camping spot in a beautiful park overlooking the ocean. At this time of year, the island's famous potato crop was at peak harvest. While filming this field being worked, I was quickly invited for a ride-along by Farmer Dale and Company. What a special learning experience. 25% of Canada's potatoes are grown right here on the island, and said potatoes account for 10% of the island's GDP. On this day alone, 1.5 to 2 million pounds of potatoes will be pulled out on this farm. It will also take 10 days to harvest the entire 500 acres of fields in this farm, and then truck them off for sorting and processing on their eventual journey to becoming fries and chips. Following red clay roads and pieces of the Confederation Trail through Summerside, I cycled westwards across the island. In the evening, I arrived at the Cape Egmont lighthouse, just in time to catch a magnificent sunset, and spent a wonderful night at this peaceful camp spot, looking out over the Gulf of St. Lawrence. I was now heading northwards, exploring the quiet western portion of the island. The Confederation Trail here had some incredible riding on smooth gravel amongst the quiet canopy of vibrant autumn-colored trees. As the setting sun began to kiss the windswept grasses, I approached the North Cape of PEI. A beautiful boardwalk through the marshes led the last few kilometers to the tip of the cape, and I camped the night at the most northerly point on the island, with gentle waves lapping the red rock shores below. The North Cape wind farm here was built as a testing ground for wind turbines, as well as an active power generating station. Although the island imports 80% of their electricity from New Brunswick, roughly 99% of on-island electricity production comes from wind. Heading eastward now back across the island, a drizzly yet peaceful day was spent again on quiet roads and doubling back on short sections of the Confederation Trail. The Confederation Trail is the gem of PEI's cycling infrastructure. Stretching 273 kilometers from east to west, with offshoots adding up to a total of 449 kilometers, this trail was formed along the entire length of the previous PEI railway. The surface is majority stone dust, with no grades over 2%, and is entirely non-motorized from spring through fall. It's truly such an incredible place to cycle. Another sun-soaked evening led me down a red clay lane to the Cape Tryon lighthouse, where I witnessed a spectacular full moon rise over the ocean as the colors of dusk faded on the opposite horizon. In the morning, warm sunlight painted the red cliffs in stunning hues, and then it was off for a quick visit to the famous house that inspired the setting of Anne of Green Gables, now a heritage place preserved by Parks Canada. I entered into Prince Edward Island National Park, riding along the Gulf Shore Parkway west, above the Cavendish Cliffs. This park had suffered extreme erosion damage due to Hurricane Fiona, many of the cliffs and dunes having been eroded nearly 10 meters. The amount of downed trees was also astounding. Areas where 70% or more of the trees were knocked down are considered to have been significantly affected. On the North Shore, nearly 25% of forests suffered this extreme fate, and the island's forests will take decades to recover. The Gulf Shore Parkway East was so heavily impacted that it was still closed when I passed through. In addition to the endless parade of potato trucks, utility service vehicles were also a constant sight on the island at this time, hard at work ferrying crews to restore power after the hurricane. After a night near the town of Morel, I headed out on a bayside section of the Confederation Trail. Much of the trail in this part of the island was inaccessible due to being blocked by fallen trees. Crews here were already at work repairing this section, so despite a few bumps and sections of erosion, it was still passable. At the town of Naufrage, I took advantage of an incredible opportunity to finally dunk in the Atlantic and warm up in the free outdoor shower outside the Port Authority building. This was Thanksgiving Day and such a treat to discover. Because the Confederation Trail traveled through dense forest here and was still blocked by blowdown, I had to divert from the Island Walk and follow instead the North Side Road. Magnificent ocean vistas led to the East Point Lighthouse, and before long, I was turning back westwards. At sunset, I found myself down yet another red clay lane and wild camping on the spectacular white sand Bothwell Beach. A quick morning ride brought me to the town of Ferry. Now, this wasn't part of my original plan, but I'm a simple man. I see a ferry, I get on the ferry. And so, a spontaneous decision having been made, and the ferry fees having been paid, I set out across the Gulf of St. Lawrence. After a peaceful 5-hour crossing, the archipelago of Les Iles de la Madeleine came into view. Surprise, I was now heading back to Quebec. A magnificent sunset illuminated the sky as we floated about 5 kilometers offshore, waiting for mechanical problems with the ferry to be fixed. And finally, very late in the evening, we berthed. I didn't film anymore, instead focusing solely on riding the 55 kilometers to the northern end of the archipelago, propelled along by a magnificent tailwind and the energy of discovering these islands for the first time at night under the moonlight. I awoke to a beautiful dawn sky on the expanse of an empty Plage de la Grande Échouerie, beside the red sandstone cliffs of Old Harry Point. This beach extends over 8 kilometers to the northeast tip of the archipelago and borders on the important bird nesting area of Pointe de l'Est National Wildlife Area. My schedule was very tight, with less than 36 hours planned on the islands until the next ferry, so it was back on the way I'd come in the previous night. Fighting a mild headwind, I cycled south down the magnificent sandy Tombolo, connecting the northern parts of the archipelago. The dunes here were peaceful and spectacular, but also suffered severe erosion from the hurricane. In the afternoon, I arrived back to Ile du Havre aux Maisons. The views here were quite alright, looking out at the lighthouse of Cape Alright. It was then back across the most populated island, Ile du Cap aux Meules, and southbound at sunset alongside Plage de la Martinique. Having cycled the 80-kilometer length of the islands that day, I watched dusk overtake the skies from the Sandy Hook Dunes, and then it was back to Cap aux Meules for a brief sleep before an early wake-up for the ferry departure in the morning. A mind-bogglingly beautiful sunrise heralded the departure from the islands, and I left grateful for the brief but magnificent time on the archipelago. And back on PEI, I headed off once more on the Island Walk route. A long but peaceful day brought me to the shores of Poverty Beach, where I spent my final night and morning on the island. I decided not to complete the loop to Charlottetown, which would necessitate more doubling back afterwards. Instead, the last island morning ride brought me alongside foggy fields, a final fallen tree section of the Confederation Trail, and to the Wood Islands Lighthouse, where I left this beautiful island and caught the ferry towards Nova Scotia.